Well, Merry Christmas in this very strange year. When I think about Christmas, I often think about a painting, and it might not be a painting that you're thinking of. It's not it's not a very Christmassy painting. It's a painting of Mary weeping over her son after he's been killed on the cross. You might think I'm a little bit nutty for thinking that's the wrong season, Chris. But it was a painting that hung in the family home of a man named Martin Kober. And for a long time, it was just sort of always in the background of this family home. And all of us have paintings like that, I'm sure. Paintings that come up in your mind that were just always a part of the background, almost to the point you don't even notice them anymore. I remember in my nan's house, there was this velvet painting that had kind of a mountain scene with a few trees and a creek. And it was just always there in this one room, and to the point that you don't even notice it. It's like the background, it's like the wood paneling that it hung on. It had always been there, would never move, and never be commented on. Don't know where it came from, and don't know if there's a story behind it. But it was always there. And for Martin Kober's painting, it was very much like that as well. It hung on the family wall in the family house, and it just was always in the background. It hung on the wall for many years until one of his kids, they were playing with a tennis ball, and they knocked it down. It fell behind the couch, and they just sort of left it there. And it sat there actually for 30 years, he said, just gathering dust, protected, I guess, behind the couch from further flying tennis balls. But it was not really a painting that they gravitated towards for any reason. It just was always there. And one day, Martin, for some reason, decided to have it appraised. And so he dusted it off and he took it to an art expert to see if it was actually worth anything, or if it was just, one of those paintings that you get, like the velvet paintings, that aren't really worth anything, that you can get in garage sales and are impossible to give away sometimes. And to his surprise, this art expert confirmed the family legend, and the expert believed that the painting was actually the work of the Renaissance painter Michelangelo, and was painted around the year 1543, and it could be worth as much as $300 million. So this is a picture of Martin and his painting. Let's see if I can get it in the frame there. And I think about that painting during Christmas because I think something as similar happens to us with the Christmas story. It's so familiar. Most of us grew up with an image of the Nativity, like the one behind us. It's on Christmas cards. The Nativity is set up in some people's yards or in the church, like it is here. And it's just everything about it, for those who grew up in the church or are peripheral to the church, everything about it is kind of familiar and warm and nostalgic. They're just part of the background. Every Christmas, these scenes kind of pop up. Most of us in the church know the story really well. So well that God coming to us as a baby, that the shock of that is lost and replaced with almost a yawn. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, heard this before. So for most of us, the story is sort of nostalgic, maybe a cozy image, and the furthest thing from shocking around Christmas. We miss the theological drama of it because it is too familiar. Though I do think that we're actually getting to the point in our society that there are people all around us who don't know this story anymore. They might know the image, but they don't know the story behind the image. But for those of us in the church or on the periphery of the church, it is like Martin Kober's Michelangelo. It is familiar. It is treated as common because it is familiar. It is a place where tennis balls can knock it off the wall. It is permitted to be hidden behind the couch and gather dust. It is not treated as valuable. It's not treasured. And I think we realize, if we realized the true value of the Christmas story, we would pick it up from behind the couch and we would dust it off and hang it somewhere with more value and protect it, treasure it. And the role of the preacher on Christmas, and I know that many of you are going to be looking at different Christmas services, which is one of the beautiful things about the time we're in, is that we can participate in enjoying what so many people are offering. There's so many preachers out there that are able to unwrap this present for us in a new way and help us to see things that maybe we didn't notice before. So I encourage you to go and check out other preachers and other services. There's a lot of carol services and organ Christmas services. It's an amazing opportunity that we don't usually get the chance because we just can't go everywhere to everyone's thing. So do take advantage of that. But it is the role of the preachers, it's the role of the worship leaders, even the musicians, to help us, like that art expert, to see what it is that we have in our possession. To sort of take a look at that painting and to be able to unpack it for us, to show us what's there and to show us its real worth. And so they hold up the painting, they pull out their magnifying lens, and they start looking at it to see what they can discover. And then we ask you to sit down because we have some news to tell you, that this thing that has been gathering dust behind your couch, this thing that the kids knocked down with their tennis ball, that we didn't give much stock to, this thing is actually worth an incredible fortune. That's the job of the preacher on Christmas, to take this familiar thing and to show us the shocking importance of it, the treasure of it. The image that the Gospels paint for us is a high contrast image, lots of light and lots of dark. The darks are very dark, the lights are very light. The baby is the brightest figure in the scene. He is God with us. In a mysterious way, to encounter this child is to encounter God. He will be for us the clearest image of God. He will teach us the profundity of God's love in a way that we could not have imagined before he arrived. It is through him that we will be challenged to love our enemies and to care for those on the margins of society. He will challenge us to not just tolerate, but to love those who are different from us, to love those who annoy us and grate us. He will show us God's deep willingness to forgive and to seek us out when we're lost. He will teach us to be transformed from the inside out. Jesus will become the way that we really know God. As Colossians 1:15 says, he is the image of the invisible God. So if you want to know about God, look at Jesus. So this bright image, this child who will grow up to be Jesus, this child is set against a very dark background. The backdrop for the image is one of political oppression. The Roman Empire covers a vast area around the Mediterranean, ranging from England to Iraq. The empire brought a certain kind of peace, but it was always peace at the threat and point of a sword. The image painted for us shows us that it is the kind of world where people can be moved about like chess pieces at the whim of the emperor. So if the emperor says, go to your hometown to be counted, you have little choice but to go. And later in the story, we will meet King Herod, who we are told is willing to destroy children to protect his throne. The baby is not laid to rest at home. He's born away from home at the command of an emperor, placed in an animal's feeding trough. The scene painted for us by the Gospels is a dark scene, and that's just the political reality, which is really just an expression of the human heart. What happens when human beings, with the darkness they carry inside of them, gain power over others. And most of us don't want to think about, we all think that we would do better, but we could use a little more humility. We don't know what kind of temptation comes with that kind of power, and whether we would have the character to hold up against it. There is darkness in the human heart, and that's what we see in this political reality. And we see that all around us, don't we? We see that in our families, we see that in the people around us. We see that in ourselves. I sometimes think about St. Paul and how he could call himself the chief of sinners. You wonder, St. Paul is the chief of sinners. And I think what he means is that he knows himself from the inside out. It's easy for people to look at him and to say, oh, what a holy person. And he can say, well, it's because you don't see all the darkness inside him. You don't see all of my thoughts. You don't see all of my temptations and all the things that I'm ashamed of. And I think every one of us could say that I am the chief among sinners, because we all see our sin from the inside. It's not a very popular thing to think about in terms of modern notions of self-esteem. But I think it's a reality. I know it's a reality in my life, and I think it's a reality in a lot of people's lives, that the way to get around that isn't to pretend we're not sinful. The way to get around it isn't to feel crushed that we're sinful either, though. So this baby is set against a very dark background, and the background is the darkness of the human heart. And the scene is painted this way because we live in a very dark world. Life is a battle. We rest from this battle on occasion, but we don't usually rest for very long before we're faced with a new challenge. It might be a sickness or a family member's sickness, the death of someone close to us, addiction, an identity crisis, a lost career, a bankruptcy, a betrayal, abuse, a pandemic. Take your pick. Check the news. There's no shortage of darkness out there. And those are the battles that we face if we're living in a place of relative prosperity. These are generally first world darknesses. So never mind places that are dealing with wars or earthquakes or food shortages or terrorism or thousands of people living in refugee camps. The scene is painted dark because life is often dark. The first noble truth in Buddhism is life is suffering. Life is hard. It's a struggle. It's a fight. It's a battle. And in the midst of that darkness is born this bright light. The Gospel of John says it this way: in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That's from John chapter 1, verse 4 to 5. He came to shine in the midst of the darkness. So appropriately, he was not born into a palace to a king and a queen. He was born in a strange place and laid in a manger to a poor couple. His birth was announced not to the emperor, but to shepherds who, in their poverty, work the night shift. He came as God with us to be our darkness, to be in our darkness with us, and to shine in the midst of it. He comes and gives us strength and hope in the midst of the battles that we face. He didn't shy away from the dangers and sufferings of life. He embraced them. He took them on as he died on the cross and gave meaning to the struggle of life. And that happened because he was willing to enter the darkness, to die, and then was resurrected. And that's God's stamp of approval on Jesus to say, this is my messenger. If you want to see God, look at him. And so because he entered into the struggles of life, he gives all of our struggles meaning if we allow him to shine his light into the midst of our darkness. None of our darkness has to be without meaning. None of our darkness has to be wasted. It can all be turned around and through that resurrection power be made meaningful and transformative. The picture that's painted for us by God in the Gospels is a high contrast image. It is a dark image with a bright image of a child. It is a familiar image that hangs in the background of our lives. And for most of us, we almost don't see it because it's so familiar. However, if we realize the true value of the image painted for us by the Gospels, we will learn to treasure it. Through this image, we are invited into a profound relationship with God who loves us more than we can possibly imagine. Through this image, we are invited into a life of meaning and substance. Through this image, we are called to be transformed people that overcome the darkness that surrounds us. Through this image, we are called to believe that God's love is more powerful than the violence of the empires of this world, more powerful than the violence within our own hearts. So this Christmas, may God grant us a renewed sense of the value of this image. Amen.